All right, Victor. So let's talk about some reasons. Why would somebody want to start a podcast if they're sitting there watching this? What's in it for them? Why would they want to do this?
Yeah. What's really interesting in my studio business is that I've seen interest grow from small business owners that these days they realize that, and I'm talking, lawyers, electricians, plumbing companies that
Oh,
realize that they don't have sort of these large, massive budgets to sort of push out awareness messages. And they're really trying to leverage social media. And, that I think there's a lot of advantages to that, having been in advertising for so long is that's where most people are spending their day right now with that device in their hand. And it's
hmm.
certainly the first place that I go to for research when I'm trying to find, a service provider. And there is absolutely something to producing content that is sharing of your expertise, right? And I'm sure you've seen content like this where it's a service provider
Yeah.
that's not doing a salesy job, but they're actually like, hey, here's a couple of tips on how not to really need my services, right? And it's just really
Yeah.
adding value. And what I've seen is in the questions that I've gotten repeatedly is, okay, so am I recording a podcast? Would I be recording a podcast with you? And the podcasting format is just one way to go about it, right? Because I'm just terribly curious about what other people do for a living. And so I can sit down with a plumber and have a conversation about what are the challenges in plumbing, and what is it that
Yeah.
people should be doing to avoid, huge charges and taking care of their stuff. And then that conversation, isn't a podcast. That conversation is a series of answers that you can cut up, and you're walking after a
Hmm.
45-minute conversation, you're walking out with a month's worth of content, right? And
Totally.
when a podcast studio is just like such an ideal place to do that. In You've got all the equipment there, and it's just in out, and you're walking out with footage that you can just cut up for social media. And I think it does that sort of content does a really good job of sort of breaking through the clutter of repetitive messages. I mean, how many ads do you see, on Instagram and Facebook on a daily basis?
In talking to some of my clients in my studio business, where one was in the studio last week and he was building a podcast into the creation of his business as a key marketing platform. It wasn't an afterthought. It was like, okay, I have to do this because he sees value in it, because it creates authority in the space. It has further reach than maybe, an ad would or that type of stuff. And then two, I think there's power in the conversation versus, there's some people just can't do a talking head video, right? They're better in this question and answer format, right? So this is a little bit less threatening. And to your point earlier, all they need is somebody to talk to, right? The other person can just be kind of a stand-in, ask some pointed questions, and then there's your great content that's engaging for the viewer that could say, yeah, I learned something, and now I feel like I trust that person. I know them a little bit more, and that's to me is marketing gold, right? Because then when they do reach out to you, they're like, "Oh, it's the same guy I saw on Instagram or wherever it is." And I feel like we're already that further along in our relationship, especially to your point. A plumber is going to come into my home, right? You want to have a trusting relationship there. So this could be critical to getting that relationship started even before meeting.
Right. One category that I have spoken to a couple of people about, but I know that you at one point in your life you were very involved in sort of the real estate space. I've got
Hmm.
friends that some are realtors, and I I can almost if I think of the content that they put out, it's good stuff, but it's always like, here's this latest listing that I just sold. It's all there, and the loan officers, or the brokers that they tend to put out these educational type videos, but it's like behind this very corporate-y sort of cubicle desk, you know, and
I'm bored
have
already,
you?
right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So I mean, I think that category is something that could really use a very friendly and, authentic sort of communication, because there's always people coming into that category that know nothing about it. Like, how many times do you buy a home, right? And so it's just such a great way to communicate and educate in a very flexible and
Yeah.
actually authentic way.
Well, 100%. And I would say too, with respect to the real estate broker, type person who may want to be like, they look at a studio like this and what am I going to do in there, right? Because they see their counterparts doing all the, gimbal videos, right? Look, walking around a house and that type of stuff. And this could be a way to stand out in a different way amongst that sea of other people that are doing the same type of content. Have a conversation where you're able, as a real estate professional, to demonstrate your value through that conversation, because that's what marketing from a real estate perspective is all about. Your services is what value do you bring to the equation that maybe somebody else doesn't, and it could be better served again through conversation than a flyer that comes in your mailbox, because there are real estate people that still do that, and
Yep.
it ends up in the trash, right? So it ends up wasted time and money when you could pay for a professional setting that actually gives you some authority, gravitas, whatever you want to call it, and maybe some street cred, and you're talking to somebody, maybe it's a lone person, maybe it's just a prospective buyer who doesn't know what they don't know, and you're kind of walking them through the process, and somebody seeing that is like, I like I like Rob, I want to call him up now, right?
Right.
So again, I think there's such power in that conversation.
There is, and I think one thing that people overlook is that this content is evergreen. You know,
Hmm.
I know that if I like a message like from an influencer, I will oftentimes go back into the profile if I find it's somebody that's interesting or that is saying something of value, that I can go back to that. And this is sort of that evergreen content that just stays up on that profile page. That can be a reference for their customers that I think lasts a whole long time, as opposed to getting a magnet get in the mail and then that goes into the trash. I think they still do that, don't they?
Oh, yes, they do that. They do like here in Seattle, it's the Seahawks football schedule. I mean, anything
Yeah,
that they can put their
yeah,
name
yeah,
and number
yeah,
on, they're going to
yeah.
throw that in an envelope and send it to you. And it's wicked expensive, right?
It,
So,
Hotchkiss World's like, it's going to get more expensive here soon, I think.
then there's that. Yes.
Yeah,
But I do think, though, from, as business owners like we are, where we own studios, we have to kind of teach them how to fish. And I'm speaking specifically about real estate brokers, because they come in here, they're like, oh, this looks pretty, this is great. And then they have literally no idea what to do. The idea of getting on camera and talking about something or having a conversation, they don't even know where to start. So I'm starting to put together like a one pager just of thought starters, right? To get them, okay, sit down, let's plan this out with you, right? Kind of hold their hand a little bit. And then I think once they get going, because these are not shy people, right?
yeah.
Then
No, I
they
think
have a
maybe
great conversation.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's that fear, like as soon as they see that little red light come on, or when you say, "All right, 3, 2, 1, we're recording,"
Right.
it's they kind of go into freak out mode. But it's definitely something that can be very easily overcome. I have found with people that are brand new to sitting in front of a camera, just
Mhm.
engaging in an actual conversation. Oh, like at some point, a minute into it, you're like, oh wait, I'm just talking to the person on the other side of the camera there, and we're just having a conversation.
But I think that also helps break the fourth wall, right? So then the viewer who's kind of watching from afar this conversation feels a little bit drawn into that conversation, and again, it builds trust, it builds authority, all that stuff. And I think that's just a gold mine there, in my opinion.
Agree. How have you spoken to clients about how it seems like recording with professional cameras and lights and microphones, it's got to be crazy expensive. My marketing budget's on the minimum, and I know I've got to potentially spend against some social media ads to get the word out about my business. What's sort of your view on the overall cost?
Speak about it from a personal perspective. So I start with, I used to have a tripod with my iPhone standing on my desk at home, trying to put out something engaging and
Right.
failing miserably because I was worried about how I looked, all the things, right? And then the tech involved, and then to go and edit it on the background to make it look like, because I'm trying to keep up with the Joneses of other influencers or content creators, right? And do all the things. And it just became overwhelming and demotivating. So if I think, if we use the example of a real estate broker again, they're all over the place. They've got to be out there generating leads, doing all the stuff that goes into listing a house. They may not have time to do all that content. And if you and I both know, if you get behind on your schedule, all of a sudden you're not being consistent, right? And that's going to affect whether it's Instagram or YouTube or whatever the platform is. You've got to show up consistently. And so to your point earlier, you can come in and be in a professional setting and just sit down and go and let somebody else handle all the tech. And I can help, bring them along and say, there's value in this. You don't have to go get all this equipment. You just come in, sit down, don't worry about anything except what you're going to say. And to me, that has, and then your point earlier, again, you've got a month's worth of content there, right, in one session. And so if you think about it that way and actually divide up the time, then it's suddenly very affordable if you come out with, say, 20 pieces of content for, I'm going to throw a number out, $300, right? Or whatever it is, maybe a little bit more depending on what the customer wants. That's valuable there, right? It's also in time, but also other investments you don't have to make from a tech standpoint.
Agree. And when you divide that cost into, because like, okay, the flyers, those cost money. Like you said, they're not cheap. Those tchotchkes, but that's sort of almost a one-on-one sort of communication channel where you can't compare the reach that you're going to get of your
Right.
message if you have a 15-30 second video clip, three times a week or two times a week on your channels. You put a little money behind that, and I'm talking about minimal money on Meta or Google, and you're reaching thousands of people. So you
Yeah.
got to take that into the equation as well from a reach perspective.
100%. And then, I mean, if you take it to the next step, right? If somebody is really showing up consistently on YouTube and everything, and they want to work toward getting monetized, right? That can create, again, to your point about evergreen content, that could start making money for you over time, right? And it's passive income. So, that could be a built-in side hustle almost, where you're doing your J job and I'm doing all this stuff over here, but then it's also making me some money because I'm adding value to that potential customer.
Absolutely. Yeah, I actually work with, or I'm going to start to work with a local influencer here in town, and she sort of lives in that Instagram world. She can has gone to every possible restaurant in town, and she's absolutely a beloved sort of authority on. And she's also a real estate agent, and she's
Okay.
starting her own channel on YouTube, but it's not necessarily I wouldn't call it necessarily a podcast, but it is a show that she's going to be doing on a weekly basis, providing sort of that education
Mm-hmm.
about real estate, how you go about it, and she's doing it in both English and Spanish, which I think is really smart, and just sort of building upon sort of the following that she's already achieved, and seeing how this is a different sort of revenue stream for her, and that this is the way to grow this new revenue stream for her apart from what she's doing on the influencer side.
And you never know. Yeah, she's a real estate broker in Dallas, but say she's going to get other reach beyond the Metroplex, and people could be subscribing to her channel because they enjoy her, right? Maybe they refer somebody to her because of that, even if they don't live in Texas, right? Or she monetizes because she's got good content, and now to me it's a win-win. And I love things that you can double dip on, I guess is the way to put it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
So what, I'm thinking about kind of, this is a good segue into why does a business need to be on YouTube? Some people would say, even my dad has said to me, now generational allowances, but why would you want to do that on YouTube? All the things. What would you say to a prospective client, maybe from a business or even an individual perspective? Why would they want to be on YouTube?
Because YouTube is now that it's so vast, the amount of information that is given on YouTube, both from an purely entertainment standpoint, but also an educational standpoint. The numbers are overwhelming of how many people are now getting their news right from YouTube, but also doing their shopping research. And I will absolutely testify to the fact that I don't buy any piece of, any of this equipment or virtually anything without going onto YouTube to look at the reviews, because inevitably
Yeah.
there's a guy who's got a channel who reviews cables, how to hook up the right HDMI cable. And he'll do this incredible job of like explaining and saving me tons of money, and there's just thousands upon thousands of people that are producing that content. And YouTube is just that natural place to get it and to get that information. You get that sight and sound, and you get that personality coming through, and that which adds trust. And YouTube is just so widely distributed. I mean, I probably watch as much YouTube on my Apple TV on my big screen as
Yeah.
I do other types of content, whether it's series or movies. And so it's just something that we all need to understand, that that's where the viewership is going for sure.
The other thing I like too, and I'm thinking about a business owner, right, is I can go in and actually see what content works and what doesn't resonate, and then index, future content on the stuff that actually works and resonates. Going back to sending out flyers or whatever, kind of legacy marketing, activities are. You're kind of shooting in the dark. At least in YouTube or even other, Instagram or TikTok or whatever, they all have those analytics parts that you can
Mhm.
dive into and really refocus your efforts pretty quickly to ensure that your audience is, that you're giving your audience what they want, and that they want to keep coming back for.
Absolutely. And, and you can get really accurate about, okay, well, that video sent them to this particular page on the website that you paid probably a bit of money to get developed, right? And you can see when they engage with that website, where is
Totally.
it they're dropping off? Are they dropping off, right in the middle of the tell me about you section, or are they dropping off pretty consistently right at the end when they view the price, and that can give you enormous insight into, well, maybe it's the price that, you know, is the problem here. And, you can adjust,
Mhm.
your offering in that sense. So I think it's just such a tool for providing messaging and also providing intelligence for you as any business owner.
And it's another level or another way to engage with your potential customer, right? Because they in the comments or even in the community post, right? Because they're commenting, you're responding back, and then suddenly that segues off of YouTube onto, like you said, to your website, and now they're actually a client or a customer. And to me, that's just better than having, we all have the little let's chat button on our website, right? Which is AI driven, right?
Right.
But if you can get somebody and you're actually engaging with them on a specific topic and having a conversation, I think those people are more likely to come through the door and be more solid leads than just throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks.
Right. Throwing money at it and praying. And it's
Right.
also the fact is, if you're a business owner, go onto YouTube and look up your competitors, whether they be local or maybe regional. Look up your competitors, because everyone is engaging on this platform, every single category. And so, you'll learn what your competitors are saying out there in real time. And that's intelligence you have to have. But you can also see in the comments, like you were saying, what your potential customers are saying about their offering or the questions that they ask. So allowing you to adapt your messaging on a continuous basis. I mean, it's just it's such an enormous flow of feedback that I think is
Yeah.
absolutely valuable.
Even there you just have to have a little bit of a thick skin because there's trolls out there in their grandmother's basements that have nothing better to do than to comment on your videos. And
Yeah.
I had one the other day, and I'm just like, I engaged, and I'm like, why am I doing this? And I just blocked them. The whole fear of being on camera, we kind of talked about it before we hit record today. Just to bring people up to speed, I had a client almost have a meltdown in my studio because she, all of a sudden, like you said before, the light went on and her mind went blank. So, do you have any tips that you would tell somebody, that's in that is holding them back from actually achieving the stuff that we've been talking about the last couple of minutes with, launching their business or their whatever they're trying to do into a new platform, that type of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, I want to always reassure somebody that just because you have been an accountant for 5 or 10 years and you have spoken about accounting day in and day out, you kind of, it's just second nature to you. But people are so hungry for learning, and they're not going to watch your content with that title of how to file your taxes in 2025. They're not going to click on that unless they're actually interested in it, and they're clicking on it because they're like, okay, I like the look of that person that's going to give that information. Let me give it a try. They're hungry for you to speak to them. So what you say is absolutely important and matters to a huge audience. And don't underestimate how many people there are out there looking for your type of business or your type of information. And so first realize that people are really want to hear from you, and they're also just people. It's no different than a conversation that you could have in line at the supermarket for the self-checkout. And if you're just waiting, oh, are you a real estate agent? Yeah, I am. Oh,
Right.
what, just heard this interest rates or something, right? And it's just that simple. And it doesn't don't get locked up with fear thinking, oh, well, I have to do a 45-minute TED Talk monologue, right? No, that's really quite the opposite.
Yes.
People don't want to hear that. They want to hear, yeah, don't do this and that with it with your faucets, because it's just going to mess it up over time. And just realize that the same conversations you have with people every day are exactly what you want to capture on camera.
Yeah, 100%. And I also my mind is going to that people actually like a little messy, right? They don't love everything that's like super scripted, that I'm sitting here reading from a teleprompter, that they smell the inauthenticity a mile away, right? And then they're going to click away. That's where your average view time is going to go off a cliff because they're sensing it, and they're like, I'm not wasting my time on this person. They're just reading from, it might as well be AI talking to me.
Absolutely. And this is not the space, that people are looking for that. There's a space for so much, and on other platforms, there's a place for the 30-second TV commercial, and that has a certain manner of being. But this
Yep.
is a human conversation, and absolutely
Yeah.
mess up. It's like just speak like a normal human being, and
Well,
you'll be fine.
and to that point, I would say don't stop comparing yourself to other people, right? Because I promise you, that person that looks their videos are perfect. There is hours of footage that ends up in the trash that they have screwed up their intro 100 times. I do it all the time. I can't tell you how many F-bombs end up on my my videos because I keep getting tongue-tied or whatever it is, right? That's okay. Everybody does it. And frankly, if you're messy or, don't worry about how you look or that type of stuff because nobody cares. They're really they want to know that the content is value added, that's what they're searching for. You're answering a question or providing value or whatever it is. That's what that's what they're looking for. And that's, if you're delivering that, all that other stuff really doesn't
Yeah.
matter.
Yeah, and you can definitely, for those that want to try sort of the talking head, sort, that's great. You can definitely try that. And again, you don't have to be crystal perfect, like you've done it for 25 years. That's fine. But that's why I do love sort of the format that we provide in that conversation, because we can ask normal human curiosity questions, and not feel intimidated about asking those questions, because that person is clearly not there to make you feel dumb, but to actually provide that information. And so that's an
Yeah.
easy way. And just I'm doing that with a couple of people, like businesses, categories that I don't really know anything about, but just quick little bit of research. ChatGPT helps me out, and I've got a whole agenda of content, that we can go through that I know they'll be able to answer with absolute expertise.
I think that's a good skill for folks like you and I who own these studios that people can come create content in, is kind of being able to assess the client, right? Some are going to walk in, sit down, pull the mic over, and say go. Others, they're not, they're a little bit earlier in their journey on camera, and how do we be sensitive to that so that they can make good content, be comfortable, make good content, and then say, wow, that wasn't as scary as I thought it would be. I kind of had fun and I want to come back. To me,
Right.
that's a good scenario. And I mean, I think just treating them like a human being and creating that environment where it's not judgmental is super important.
Agree. Rob, you can go into a podcast studio and sit there for an hour and, let's say, have these conversations with the intent of cutting that up into different pieces of content for your channels
Hmm.
that last a bit. Do you need to? Does it take 2-3 hours, or can you get a significant amount with just an hour worth of recording?
Yeah, I would say my coaching to a client would be you need to be strategic about your time. If you're only given an hour, really put some time into some pre-work of how you're going to, what you want to say, how you're going to say it, that type of stuff. And the reason I say this is I had clients come in a couple weeks ago, and it was almost like they woke up on a Sunday and said, "Let's create a podcast." And they found my website and booked some time. True story. But when they came in, they were not prepared, and they were all over the map. It, it came out fine, I suppose. I think it could have been come out better, and we could have had more a better produced show to give them back if they'd put just a skosh. I'm talking just an outline together. I'm not saying do tons of market research or whatever it is, but just kind of have a flow, because you want to also think about your viewer who and them not clicking away. So how are you going to entice them to stay for the full video is super important too. And if you just sit down and start talking and don't think in those terms, people are going to click away and maybe miss a vital piece of information toward the end of the video that if you didn't tease that, they're like, I'm bored already, right?
Right.
So I think having that pre-work is my coaching to them. Just again, it doesn't have to be super involved, but I think it's critical.
Absolutely. One of the formats that some of my business clients have actually been using the podcasting space for is to record actual testimonials with their customers, and
Mm.
bring them in and have a very honest conversation of what their experience with their business was, how they learned about them, and what talk about you had these initial questions, and these were your doubts, and remember we chose to do X, Y, and Z, and it seems you were very happy with that. Tell me a little bit about that. And so that's great content, that's real and authentic, and it's not that shot that you've seen before of this beautiful lighting in this home, and it's just this person speaking to a camera that direction, and it's being shot from here, and just kind of weird, and they're reading that script, but it's actual, a business owner speaking to their customer about that whole process. And I think that is a great, easy way to do it, because business owners that have happy customers, they love to talk about that. And, that's easy and very authentic to capture.
Well, to your point about somebody as a potential customer, going to YouTube or their website or whatever it is, that video that you just talked about, that type of thing may stand out more than this paragraph, that somebody is writing as a review from like Google or whatever it is. Those are important, but the video is, I'm going to go click on that first if I'm perusing somebody's website. And because then it's not just the words, it's the excitement of the person, that you're engaged with, or that's telling that story of what experience they had working with them in that business. I mean, I just think, it's going to jump off the website and probably could cause somebody to book and be like, hey, they had a great experience. I'm in. How do I get this person to come work with me or whatever it is?
Absolutely. So, Rob, a lot of folks are thinking about, okay, well, can I start a solo podcast? Is this something that I can, sort of just do on my own, put myself in front of camera? If I've had some stories that I want to tell, like, what do you respond to that?
I say don't let fear stand in your way. One person comes to mind for me. I stumbled upon her channel on YouTube. YouTube told me I needed to get, probably because she and I are closer in age. She's older, but her channel is called Silver and Solo. She's maybe, let's say, 5 years away from retirement. But what I love about her, I find her absolutely charming. It's talking head videos, but she's an absolute introvert. So her getting over and getting on camera was a big deal. And she tells this story. And her videos are probably, I don't know, 10 to 20 minutes a pop. She's methodical about her posting schedule. And she started in January of 2024 with 0 subscribers and no views. And she's like, I'm going to do this. And then she right now, just over almost a year and a half later, I just checked, it was like 97,000 subscribers. And I've actually heard people reference her on their YouTube channels, not unlike I do, because I think I don't know, I'm super impressed with her. And she's super low tech. Like, I'm like, hey, you could come in the studio. She's in Canada, so that won't work. But,
Yeah.
but she does very low tech, but it's going back to what we said before. She is showing her authentic self. And that's what's resonating with people, as she talks about challenges of navigating a workplace as an older worker or going toward retirement or tons of stuff. Sometimes it's just her walking her dog and talking. And it is absolutely charming. It's clearly resonated. So I say that to answer your question. It's a long-winded answer, but she found a community online that she never knew existed. And had she not gotten over herself and her fears, as I said, she's an introvert, she may never have found that. And, she's a single woman. She's unmarried. And, as she goes to retirement, this is an outlet for her to have that community of people that she may not have interacted with before. And I think it's awesome. And I think it's an inspiration for people to get out there. And now she's killing it with like 5 to 10 grand a month.
There you go. There
Right.
you go.
I think she got monetized in 3 months. So she's just one of the people I follow, and I just love the story. But I think given somebody who's an introvert can do it, you can too. You can get over yourself, not you, but you're already over yourself. But, and just hit record. Do you know who Sean Cannell is? He wrote YouTube Secrets.
Yes.
So I love his intro on all his videos, or whoever his team is. They're like, you just got to hit record. And basically that, I think it says volumes that just get over yourself. If you've got something to say, if you want to find a community, hit record and you'll get better with each video. It does get better. Your first ones are going to suck. It's fine. Nobody cares. And just go. And I think your life could potentially change, and you could meet lots of people from around the world that you may never have met before.
Absolutely. I've never ever once been interested in owning my own bass fishing pond, but there's a influencer out there. His name is Bama Bass, and owns a beautiful farm. But every Sunday he puts out a video about the progress of his bass pond, and I can't tell you how fascinated I am to watch every one of his videos, every minute of it, because he's talking about these bass with such passion that I get FOMO. It's like, wait, if this nice guy loves these fish so much and is building this huge habitat for them so that he can fish them and throw them back, and just watch them grow. I'm like, that's just amazing. And I find something, a community I never would have gone, and living in downtown Dallas, I never would have found people like that. But it's almost like I look forward to his episodes, like I can't wait to watch those. And so, yeah, absolutely. It's about not only building your own community, but finding different communities that maybe you didn't even realize you were interested in.
Yeah, I'll just give another quick example. There's this guy, he's renovating a chateau in France. It's called Escape to Rural France. This is channel. This chateau was it burnt down at some point, and when he bought it, there was literally a tree growing up through the middle of the chateau, and so now he's gone. I watch him 3 times a week, and it is literally just him working. But it's like I feel like I want to root for him, and give him the views because he's using the money he's making off of YouTube to finance the renovation. And, there's, again, to your point, would I ever have actively looked for somebody renovating a chateau? No.
No.
Am I a fan? Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. So, solo people, if you've got something to say, get on there. Just hit record if you need help.
Yeah.
We're here to help.
Again, nobody cares what you look like. It's
Oh,
okay.
Trust me, I know.
This video was recorded and produced by Just Talk Studios, the premier video podcasting studio in Bellevue, Washington. Visit justtalkstudios.com to learn more and book your session today.